i.e., it's not bad that the inflammation shows up. It's when they never leave. That's when it's a problem. That chronic low-grade inflammation has been linked to nearly every major chronic disease, from heart disease to dementia. And this is like old science.
The information shared on the Rethink It podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. While Dr. Sande is a licensed medical provider, the content of this podcast is not a substitute for professional medical diagnosis, treatment, or advice specific to your individual health needs. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any decisions related to your health or medical care.
Welcome back to the Rethink It Podcast, the podcast where we challenge what you think you know about brain health, longevity, and healing. We are not here to chase symptoms or hand out quick fix Band-Aids. We're here to ask better questions. We rethink pharmaceuticals as the first answer, explore cutting-edge natural science, and most importantly, we empower you to partner with your body's innate healing wisdom. Today's episode might just connect some dots that you didn't even know were connected. What if the very medicine you reach for to relieve your arthritis, your back pain, and your headaches is actually quietly setting the stage for more inflammation, not just in your joints, but in your gut, brain, and immune system? What if your brain fog, fatigue, and your sense of not quite yourself could be connected to that? We're going to unpack the COX pathway. Woo, that has a fun name, doesn't it? I remember learning that and thinking, that's crazy. And then at the time, Scrubs was a cool thing. And Dr. Cox always made me laugh because I always thought about the COX pathway. And if you guys don't know the reference, go back and watch Scrubs and you'll love Dr. Cox. He's sarcastic, rude, and hilarious. Anyway, we're going to unpack that COX pathway, NSAIDs. We're going to unpack the chronic inflammation picture and how they tie directly to your brain health, your long-term wellness, plus the natural science-backed tools that you can help to resolve inflammation instead of just kind of muting it. So let's start with talking about inflammation. Inflammation is not the enemy. Okay, think of it like a construction crew after a bad storm. Okay, they roll in with their trucks, their tools, their supplies, immune cells, chemical messengers. Those are what those trucks and tools and supplies are, okay? They work quickly, they clear debris, repair roofing, they patch walls. While they're working, it might be a little noisy, messy, and inconvenient. That's our pain and our swelling, okay? The problem is that it's not that they show up. I.e., it's not bad that the inflammation shows up. It's when they never leave. That's when it's a problem. That chronic low-grade inflammation has been linked to nearly every major chronic disease, from heart disease to dementia. And this is like old science. So let's talk about NSAIDs. NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. That's what NSAIDs are. Okay, those are your Motrins, your Aleve, your help me out, people. Naproxen. The military's favorite prescription is an antibiotic and some naproxen. So ibuprofen, naproxen, Celebrex. Those are all COX-2 inhibitors. They're NSAIDs. Okay. So let's talk about Dr. Cox, the COX pathway. That COX pathway is actually a 2-lane highway. So we have 2 lanes, and they both kind of deal to some degree with inflammation. Lane 1, our COX-1 pathway, maintains your daily essentials like gut lining, kidney protection, normal clotting. And that's why, when you're taking something like Plavix or warfarin, you don't also take an NSAID. COX-2, lane number 2, is your emergency lane. So they're basically dispatched during urgent pain or when there's swelling signals, when there's these signaling molecules sent out that there's a problem. NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, close typically the COX-2 pathway, that COX-2 lane. And that's why the pain and swelling drops. Okay, there's a place for that. Thank God for NSAIDs to some degree. But You may also when you block that COX-2 pathway, you may also block that return home route, the chemical pathway that tells the inflammation crew that we're done and you need to get out, go home. We're good. Thanks. So the traffic reroutes through the back roads, which is called the LOX pathway. That's the leukotriene oxidative blah, blah, blah pathway. So that LOX pathway, then all this traffic goes through that pathway, and that produces leukotrienes. Okay, and those leukotrienes, they damage the gut lining and the lung tissue, gut and lung. Okay, so that's why, sometimes NSAIDs can also be contraindicated when you have asthma. So if you're asthmatic, you may be told that you shouldn't be taking an ibuprofen. There is a hidden cost for these drugs as well. I recommend you get the book Drug Muggers if you really want to see all the, hidden costs to all the drugs out there. Every drug comes at a cost. And if we know what they are, sometimes we can mitigate those costs, take our medications as needed, and hopefully not go down the pathway of polypharmacy. But the hidden costs for NSAIDs, there are some of these kind of nutritional deficiencies associated with the gut. Most people don't recognize that NSAIDs don't just change that inflammatory pathway, they also deplete the nutrients that are associated with that gut. So that are associated with a healthy gut, because the damaging of the gut and the interference that they cause in absorption. So long-term NSAID use, this is a problem in the older people with arthritis, right? We write them a prescription for naproxen and we end up with concerns for gut issues, kidney problems. Long-term use leads to sometimes a reduction in iron, which contributes to fatigue, brain fog, poor oxygen delivery to the brain. There's a reduction in the absorption of your folate and your B12, which is important for your brain, neurotransmitters, making myelin, having a healthy mood. Vitamin C is directly reduced through the damage to the gut, and that's needed for your collagen, for your immune system, obviously for antioxidant defense. Magnesium is reduced. The absorption of magnesium is reduced, which is important for nerve signaling, again, your mood, and brain excitability. So I feel hyperactive and ADHD might be a magnesium problem. Vitamin D and calcium is also impacted, which then, of course, leads to weakening of your bones and poor immune function and mood regulation. So if you think of your gut like a loading dock for nutrients, when NSAIDs repeatedly kind of scrape and damage the dock through like these microbleeds, because they basically disrupt that healthy barrier of your gut. That ends up leading to your delivery starting late, maybe becoming incomplete or not showing up at all, meaning your nutrients just don't get to you. Over time, the nutrient storage can amplify the very problems you are fixing. So the nutrient shortage, nutrient shortage. So when we have less iron, B12, C, magnesium, and D, we end up potentially making inflammation worse because we're deficient, okay? And then you end up with another problem to fix: brain fog, fatigue, mood problems, and slower healing. So that's a problem. So let's talk about a couple of things you may have never heard of. One of my favorite products are something called SPMs. They're specialized pro-resolving mediators. That's what they stand for. And essentially, they are the project managers of inflammation. So if you take these SPMs, they arrive after the emergency, and they basically tell the crew, you're good, stop, it's time to pack up. They sweep up the debris, they restore the order. Okay. Omega-3s are how we produce SPMs. They're the raw material for SPMs. EPA, DHA are the raw materials. SPMs are the ripe fruit of those raw materials, if you consider them. They'd be like the EPA, the DHA are like the seeds. The SPMs are the ripe fruit. So chronic stress, toxins, infections, and aging can slow your body's conversion of omega-3s into SPMs. So NSAIDs that block COX-2 can also block this conversion signal, leaving you without your resolution crew. So the point of that is even though EPA, DHA are the substrate for which we make SPMs, the process happens in the body. And if there's a problem with the conversion, then we can't use our omega-3s to make those SPMs. And so therefore, when we supplement directly with the SPMs. And so we don't require the body to make it. So those SPMs then act kind of to block that COX-2. NSAIDs that block the COX-2 also block the conversion signal, right, of the omega-3s being converted SPMs, and that leaves you without resolution. So obviously, when we take the SPMs, we end up bypassing that step of requiring omega-3s being converted, and that is really powerful. They basically tell the whole process to stop, because when you take your COX-2 inhibitors, remember we have that leukotriene backdoor, so the pathway then diverts backwards and through signals called like cytokines and stuff like that, and they continue the inflammatory cycle through the other backdoor, which actually is pretty bad because that's where the gut damage happens, right? So then your SPMs come in and say, hey, yo, leukotrienes, cytokines, we're good. We don't need you no more. And they stop that process. And so what happens is you got your NSAIDs that stop the big inflammation and help reduce your swelling. And then the SPMs come in and shut the whole pro-inflammation pathway off so that the inflammation doesn't persist on a low-grade level, leading to damage. So that's why it's a good complement sometimes to an NSAID. I find it very, very, very helpful as a sole product to use by itself instead of an anti-inflammatory. I haven't used an NSAID even with surgeries in I don't know, a decade. So this is a really powerful tool to use. So another set of compounds that you might want to consider instead of NSAIDs, or alongside, it depends, would be your polyphenols and other kind of natural anti-inflammatories. SPMs aren't the only way to resolve inflammation. So nature kind of offers us this wide spectrum of compounds that sort of gently calm that inflammatory pathway without shutting down the immune system. Those leukotrienes that get kind of activated when we block the COX-2 pathway, they also signal a lot to the immune system that there's a problem, and they kind of cause a suppression of your immune system as a secondary thing. So that's another byproduct that, we could go into all the details on the cell physiology, but that's another problem with it. So chronic inflammation that's triggered from using your NSAIDs can lead to immune suppression, gut lining problems, lung problems. So what if we could just use something natural that doesn't do all that? So let's talk about polyphenols. Polyphenols would be kind of what you guys probably have already heard of, your curcumin, your EGCG, your resveratrol, your quercetin. So they all have kind of different roles to play. Essentially, polyphenols come from plant-based compounds that are found in colorful vegetables, fruits, teas, spices. Some even can cross the blood-brain barrier, which makes a huge impact directly on the brain, inflammation, and the nervous system. So let's talk about curcumin. It's very popular. Everybody knows about curcumin. I mean, I could do a whole podcast on the power of curcumin. It's amazing. I remember when I did a cross-study research where I just kind of looked at all the research just before we had AI to help us with that. It took me days, but because there was so much information, and that's what blew me away. And this was a decade ago. There was tons of information about the power and the impact of curcumin in the positive way. And then I, meet my friends that are from India, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we use it all the time. We put curcumin on our zits, and it goes, the turmeric on our zits, and make a paste, and that's how we clear our skin and use it for everything." So curcumin is a pretty powerful tool. We know that there's something to need to enhance its effect, like black pepper and things like that. But curcumin has been researched for a lot of things, and it has been known to reduce those inflammatory cytokines, so those things that are triggered in that LOX pathway. It supports the gut-brain barrier, and it has been linked all by itself to improved cognition. It works best when it's enhanced, like we said, like by things that have piperine in it, which would be black pepper and things like that. So bioavailability increases if you have some degree of those piperines, phytosomes, things like that. EGCG. I'm not going to try to say that what it actually stands for, because it's a long kind of thing and I'm going to mess it up right here on air and I'll be embarrassed. So, so we're just going to say EGCG. If you Google EGCG, you will find the answers and you can read it and say it for me. But EGCG is a compound that we find commonly in green tea. It is a powerhouse for protecting the neurons. Okay, improving the energy metabolism inside the brain. And it supports a healthy microglial function, and that is the brain's immune system. We want healthy microglia because if they're not healthy, they start scarring down the brain. Okay, resveratrol, on the other hand, this popped onto the scene. I think this was a decade ago. I feel like it was. Everything feels like it was a decade ago. It may have been longer, but it popped on the scene when I think the New York Times or something, did this huge spread about why everybody should drink a glass of red wine every day because of the resveratrols. I remember having this conversation with one of my colleagues in the hospital, and he was like, oh yes, I need to drink red wine every night. I'm like, I just don't understand. And I mean, I didn't know anything really compared to what I know now. It's like, I just don't understand why we think we're going to get good resveratrol from a poisonous drink. Because ultimately, what is alcohol? It's a true direct poison. So, I mean, I'm not judging here. I drink a glass of wine every now and then, so there's no judgment. But I felt like the push for the red wine was weird because, resveratrols, if they're in red grapes and berries, I mean, can't we just eat the grapes and berries to get the most benefit from the resveratrol rather than promoting everybody drink a glass of red wine? But I digress. So resveratrol is really powerful because it does support mitochondrial health. And we, 2 million mitochondria per neuron, gazillion up there. Okay, we need to support the density of those mitochondrial little bodies in our nervous system. Okay, so resveratrol, it supports our mitochondrial health. It improves blood flow to the brain, which is really important as we age. A lot of times we start getting breathing more shallow. We reduce our oxygenation. We reduce our blood flow to our brain just naturally. And then add to that, if you guys have abnormal methylation pathways like the NOS pathway, you'll end up with a natural genetic predisposition to poor blood flow. So there's a lot of things that kind of disrupt blood flow to the brain. So enhancing that naturally is great. Would I encourage you to eat lots of grapes and berries? Yeah, let's do it. How about quercetin? Quercetin is amazing for the immune system. Powerhouse for balancing things like histamine. So if somebody is a histamine-driven person, mast cell, POTS, these type of things where you break out in hives all the time, quercetin is probably an herbal or a supplement that you might need to consider. And they're actually found in high concentrations in apples and onions, and they stabilize the mast cells that produce histamine. So these big buckets of histamine floating around your immune system are ready to act to release histamine, because histamine then causes the body to have vasodilation, improves blood flow to an area in order to heal it, right? So histamine is released when there might be a need to bring messengers to an area very quickly, and that's the idea. It's a good thing, but the problem is we end up with a histamine-dominant state in a lot of situations like asthma, and NSAIDs make this worse. So quercetin, really powerful polyphenol for anti-inflammation by addressing the histamine problem, balancing histamine. Other things that you might consider would be things like boswellia. Excuse me. So boswellia, this is what you find in frankincense. A lot of these anti-inflammatory products, natural anti-inflammatory products, contain boswellia. And what's beautiful about boswellia, remember we just touched on that LOX pathway. So COX gets blocked and then the LOX gets activated, right? And so then you get that low-grade persistence of inflammation. Well, boswellia, similar to our SPMs, blocks that blocks pathway, reducing the leukotrienes and then easing joint pain, inflammation, and actually gut inflammation particularly. So very powerful herbal botanical product that can be extracted and used indirectly, or you can get it in its whole form with frankincense. So another botanical to look at that's really surprisingly anti-inflammatory, because it's so spicy. It just surprised me that this product is anti-inflammatory, but it's ginger. Ginger, that spicy stuff at the sushi restaurant. Ginger blocks your inflammatory enzymes, so it supports your digestion, and it has, like, of course we know it's mild. It's got anti-nausea impacts, has mild anti-nausea effects that can really benefit a brain injury recovery. Okay, so when you take ginger, you get such an improvement. This is one of those, this and boswellia, that can cross the blood-brain barrier very effectively, to help reduce inflammation and help improve brain recovery. I like essential oils in these categories because they aren't cures, but they're super complementary and supportive in modulating inflammatory pathways. They can be easily applied. Again, you've heard me say they're just so versatile. They're so easy to use, but the caveat is that they need to be clean, pure essential oils, not the ones from your arts and crafts shop, and probably not ones from some random website somewhere. Okay, so top anti-inflammatories I would kind of grab that have a powerful effect on modulating inflammatory pathways, like we said, is frankincense. That's Boswellia cartii for the most part. It supports your immune balance. It calms the overactive inflammatory signaling, kind of shuts down that LOX pathway. Lavender, we know. You get sunburn, you put lavender on it, right? It reduces your oxidative stress, and it has a really mild calming effect on the nervous system. Now, there are some people who say that they have the opposite effect on their nervous system. That lavender sometimes can make them a little hyper. So yes, that can be the case. If you're that person, don't use it. But 90% of the population, there's a pretty decent oxidative stress reduction that occurs from the use of lavender, and it's super calming to the nervous system. Helichrysum is known for its tissue repair, so where we get inflammation causes some of that breakdown of collagen. Helichrysum can help restore that balance, and then it also has a very, very powerful antioxidant properties, which that's anti-aging. When you hear antioxidant, think anti-aging. Peppermint is cooling. So, these are things you can use topically. You can even use them inhaled. Depends on where the inflammation you're dealing with. If we're dealing with the joint, we can put some topical applications on here. If we're dealing with inflammation in the brain, we can do this inhaled, and it's very passively effective through inhalation into that cribriform plate in the back of your face. Goes straight up into the limbic system and gets circulated through the brain, and it's powerful. So peppermint's cooling. It can support healthy circulation and especially to the brain. Of course, like I said, they're not cures for anything, but they definitely hit some support when it comes to inflammation naturally, rather than taking, say, naproxen. Okay. Hey guys, I wanted to pop in, interrupt our podcast to encourage you guys and let you guys know, if you didn't know, our book is available. Stephen's story about his struggle through Lyme disease. Our book, Kids Get Lyme Disease Too, One Boy's Journey of Trusting God Through Lyme Disease. It is available on all areas that you can get books. Everything from Amazon to Barnes & Noble to everywhere in between. All the places that you pick up books, you can pick up our book. So please support us and get the word out. If you have a child that's struggling, it doesn't have to be Lyme. I know so many children who just feel weird because their health doesn't match that of their peers, and they feel isolated. They feel unseen, frustrated, and alone. This book is meant to encourage those children. It's meant to encourage you parents that you can get through it. It's meant to make you feel seen and heard and give you hope. So please pick up our book. Thank you so much for supporting our podcast and all the things that we do. You can see it's an ever emerging thing. I'm changing my studio. Today I'm wearing scrubs because this is the only time I've had to record, and I'm doing the best we can. And I appreciate that you guys are here with me at the root level, at the ground floor, as I'm trying to get information out to you guys that is valuable and hopefully life-changing, starting with the book. So pick up the book wherever you can pick up books, and thank you in advance for all your support. So what happens when the brain is inflamed? It's a bad thing when the brain's inflamed. The inflammation can happen anywhere in the body, and it can definitely spill into the brain. We take NSAIDs long enough, you're going to have some low-grade inflammation that even affects the brain. And when that happens, your brain's crew, the cleanup crew, that crew is called the microglia. Okay, they're the immune cells that normally protect your neurons. When the cleanup crew never arrives, these microglia start tearing down the healthy wiring. So that's a problem. Okay, so if the immune system's impacted, it will impact your microglia. Okay, and when the microglia don't do their job, we'll get scarring. Okay, scarring that tears down the myelin, and it breaks up, it injures the brain. And what you see as a result of that are things like autoimmunity. Your microglia are basically working off the wrong blueprint, and they're attacking their own tissues. So you can get autoimmunity. We do lab testing for exactly those type of things. You can get dementia from that. The microglia start dismantling areas of the brain that are involved in memory and your thinking networks. You can get post-viral fatigue and long COVID. So the lingering inflammation is gone. The infection is gone, but you have lingering inflammation. And of course, Lyme mold illness can show up as well. Post-surgical brain fog. So you take a ton of NSAIDs, but you don't take anything to help support that shutdown system. Then you get post-surgical brain fog, and the debris of inflammation is never cleaned up by the microglia. And so you can see how when we take NSAIDs and we don't support our body naturally with those healthy polyphenols and some healthy omega-3s, or even direct SPMs, we can set ourselves up for a picture that looks alarming and not very good for our brain. So what can we do instead of taking NSAIDs? Even if NSAIDs are necessary, you can do a short-term bandage, we can do that. But there's some tools to kind of help complete that cycle of shutting down inflammation. We don't want to just shut one of the highways down and reroute the crew into another direction. You could take some really healthy, good omega-3 fatty acids. Make sure they're good quality. Make sure they're not garbage. That's only going to hurt you more. You can take some SPMs, the direct SPMs. You can take some curcumin. It's like a diplomatic negotiator. It works through the inflammation and talks to everybody and gets everybody kind of calmed down and going the right way. You can take ginger and boswellia to help soothe the joint and ease the gut. Add some resveratrol to boost your mitochondria and your immune system. And you can take glutathione or NAC, and these are really powerful tools to help clear that oxidative clutter that happens. So when you have oxidation occurring everywhere, there's debris everywhere. So the glutathione NAC basically cleans up that extra broken down debris, which then reduces your inflammation and improves your immune system, and shuts that cycle down. And of course, there's some really important things that you never want to never want to miss, I guess. Of course, we want to take all the supplements that are healthy and supportive, but you do not need to, those do you no good if you don't do the ABCs. When we do CPR, if you don't know the answer to the question, it's probably airway, breathing, or circulation. ABC, airway, breathing, circulation. Go there first. And most likely it's airway, which is why anesthesia is the bomb, right? We do the airway. But no, airways first, right? Before you move to even circulation, are you breathing? Sir, are you breathing? And the ABCs, the airway, breathing, circulation, of reducing inflammation and doing pretty much anything holistically well is sleep, rest, and gut health. Okay. So of course you need to get sleep, especially when we're dealing with low grade inflammation that has now impacted the brain. We've got to allow the lymphatic system to be able to move the debris out of the nervous system. And sleep is the only way you can do that. You need hydration because your cells, we are 90% water, right? If you don't have enough hydration, you don't have good lymphatic flow, you don't move garbage out of the circulation. And then breath work. You need to breathe. I know that you say, I do it every day, I'm breathing. But I believe, I bet you if you took inventory, you're breathing very shallow and you're holding your breath more than you know. I challenge you today to notice, to pay attention. Notice when you hold your breath in conversation, at home when you're mad at your kids, when things just don't go right. Take note. I bet you do it more than you notice. Breathwork is powerful for stimulating that vagus nerve and getting everything to calm down, including inflammation. It allows your body to heal. Gut health, of course, you've got to support your gut health. If you've been taking NSAIDs, you cannot go anywhere without giving your gut lots of love. So gut health is key here, and you definitely want to give yourself the tools to support that, like probiotics and enzymes and all the things. Make sure you're getting a good nutrient dense meals, Mediterranean paleo, and just give your gut all the tools to heal. So, all that to say, it would be, isn't it surprising that something that you might be taking without thinking about it because your doctor prescribed it may actually be part of the problem? Your body with inflammation is not necessarily broken. You've been taking a medication, it's probably triggered this low-grade leukotriene craziness, right? So you're just having a problem with your wrap-up crew. Like, we got to tell everybody to go home. The debris site is cleared. We can now put a house there. Inflammation is a good thing. It helps our bodies send the messengers to bring the cells in to do the repair. But the problem is when it persists. Pain is a signal, but so is healing. When you suppress pain without supporting repair, and you drain your nutrient stores in the process, we risk living in a permanent construction zone. I don't know about you, but I've lived in a construction zone. I have lived through renovating a kitchen before where I had to move everything into my dining room, including my countertop stove and the tea and the kettle and didn't have, had a little tiny oven, a toaster oven thing, and the kids and the mess. Oh my gosh, it was miserable. It is not fun to live in construction zone, and your body doesn't like it either. So when you need relief, you can reach for it when you need it, but you also need to reach for the tools that might help you finish the job of recovering that inflammation and to protect your brain and to keep your body in balance for the long haul. Remember, your brain was designed to heal. Every cell in your body is listening to how you care for it. Keep showing up for yourself in small and powerful ways. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and stay empowered.